Well, we finally got the episode of Mike that packed a punch emotionally. But to do so, Mike has to take the role of the villain. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, ring that bell below, leave a comment. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. The fifth and sixth episode of Hulu's Mike limited series has dropped. I mistakenly said that there were 6 episodes because that's all that sort of has been shown, but it's actually 8 total. So these are the penultimate 2 before we get the final 2. I sort of have to treat these 2 episodes completely different and separate from each other because they are vastly different in the way that they are constructed and shot. And for good reason. First episode, episode 5, is called Desiree. And it completely changes the focus of who is telling the story in this episode. This episode is all about the rape that occurs at the hands of Mike to beauty pageant contestant Desiree Washington. In this episode, Desiree is our focal point. She is now the storyteller. She's the person who's talking directly to the camera, breaking the fourth wall. So that piece that we've been using for the first few episodes comes in quite handy here and packs a big wallop. It's a lot more heartfelt. And I think a lot of the times when I had issues with the first few episodes and subsequently the episode after this, where it seemed like they were pulling their punches and not telling everything or being very surface level at stuff, was done on purpose because we were seeing it through the eyes of Mike. And Mike is always going to have sort of a glass cover, like that's just the way that he sort of sees things. He doesn't always see himself as the villain. He sometimes sees himself more as the victim of it all. It's like, oh, they're doing this to me, or I had the system doing this to me. In this episode, when we flip it, we get more of Mike being basically that Terminator, that bad person that sort of just surrounds this beacon of little hope. Desiree is very hopeful, very happy, a super sweet girl, 18-year-old, which I did not realize she was that young at that point in time. Doesn't matter about her age, depending on what happened, but I just didn't realize she was that young. 18 from a small town, who family, the men in her family, and her to an extent, idolized Mike Tyson. He was a black hero at the time, a black superhero, if you will. And so she is doing the beauty pageant like project and like doing commercials and dancing, learning all the steps she has to do for the beauty pageant. And here, black celebrities are coming left or right. You got Jesse Jackson and everybody else you could think of. Mike Tyson comes in. And I guess he's going to be a part of a commercial ad that they have. And Mike sort of sets his eyes on Desiree. And they're flirting, but she's in a way of a naivete. It seems like she's never been on a serious date. She's definitely never been in a relationship. She's a Christian girl. She's never done that. But Mike has very much put his teeth into a bone, and he's not letting go. She exchanges numbers with him. She gives him her number. She's asleep. He calls her at night in the limo. Says, "Come on down." And like, it's one of those things of being excited, celebrated. She's like, "Oh my God, Mike Tyson called me. Like, he actually really, truly called me." And his girls are like, and her girls are like, "You should go. You gotta go down there. Does she need somebody to come with you?" And Mike is very adamant, like, "No, just come by yourself." Doesn't think anything of it. Very naive, very like sweet, innocent girl saying, "Hey, I'm gonna go hang out with Mike and go to a party or something like that." That's in her brain what she thought was happening. Where Mike had a very different ball game happening on her. He coaches her into going to his hotel room. There's no party. He says it by saying, "Hey, I gotta pick up something." She thinks I have to pick up something before I have to go to this party. He's like, "I'm gonna get her up there." And they take her to the room. She sees, like, this is one of the biggest rooms I've ever seen. She's still like looking in awe of the place. Her brain, as a child, isn't thinking about anything sexual. She's like, "Oh my God, I'm in like Mike Tyson's hotel." She doesn't think that comes with anything or that it means anything. It shouldn't. She should be able to, honestly, if she wanted to, she should be able to walk around that hotel butt ass naked, truthfully, without the fear of being raped. Mike goes into bed and kind of just starts disarming her a little bit by having a conversation, saying like, "What do you like to do? Tell me a little about yourself." She goes in like, "I'm 18," and she's full of life. She's a girl who like word vomits out how she feels. She is very much saying, "Hey, I did this. I'm graduating this way. I'm Christian. I'm going to college. I'm doing all of this." And he's like, "All right, oh, that's cool. Are you a fan of me?" He's like, "Yeah, you're my dad and my dad, my grandfather, my brother love you." And I was like, I like you too. He's like, "You seem cool." And then he starts making it sexual, and it turns, and she immediately like realizes she's on the defense. Like, wait, I may have put myself in a situation that I can't actually get out of. And then she says she needs to go to the restroom. She does so. And unfortunately, at this point in time in history, there are no cell phones. There's nothing. She goes in that bathroom. She has no way to sort of defend herself or get out of the situation. We also learned that at that point, I didn't really follow the court case at that point in time, and I'll get on sort of why in a bit. Um, she was on her menstrual cycle, so she was bleeding at this point in time. So she's changed her pad. She comes back out of the bathroom and Mike is completely naked and starts forcing himself upon her. This is shot in a way that is pretty. It's hard. It is hard hitting to watch. She is retelling the story while the actual rape is happening, but she's retelling the story in real person, in real time, to a courtroom in her lawsuit. So she is standing over herself and Mike being going through this brutal situation while she is watching it and kind of reliving it. And I can just imagine that that is something that goes through her head pretty consistently um, to this day. It's hard. It's rough. We sort of see the court process and how it is doing everything humanly possible to villainize Desiree. Like there are people saying that she is a gold digger. There are people saying that she's trying to bring down one of the most powerful black men. Like her whole goal to go into that room, the whole goal to go into um, the limo that late at night was to try and get money out of her. A big thing that happens still to this day, because there are so few African American heroes, we tend to deify and make them bigger than life. They become these godlike creatures that we, as a society, as black people, try to overcorrect for their faults. And so, um, when you have like the R. Kellys, the Bill Cosby's, the OJ's, even though we in our brain are like, yeah, they're wrong. What they did was wrong, and they should be punished. We don't want typically society to be the one to punish them because they are one of our prominent black men, and be damned if who they have harmed to do so. Because typically in these instances, with the exception of OJ and Cosby to an extent, they are also hurting black women as they do this. And so it's a weird and just unfortunate and terrible situation where they are both being praised for being the black god, but by doing so, they are destroying black women. Um, and that is what's happening here. And this court proceedings go on and they make her feel bad. Her parents, I don't know if it's as a result of this, but I imagine this was a strain on them because her dad was such a huge Mike Tyson fan, but they get divorced in real life. You don't really see that in this episode, but that's just something that it's sprinkled in through a video conference that friends have, so you're aware of it. Which just shows you the kind of the toll that it takes on her life. Mike gets up there on the stand and just blatantly lies. She says she wanted it. She makes it seem like her whole goal was to go up into that room and have sex, and then he allows her to leave. She's like, maybe I should just walk down with her. She might not felt that bad, but she left that hotel with her clothes in her hand, her shoes off, and her completely disheveled. And her entire demeanor of being this happy-go-lucky, hopeful young girl is completely destroyed. She is now a shell of herself. You have Don King and Louis Farrakhan, these powerful, prominent black men doing everything humanly possible to demean this young girl. And then calling to arms women and be like, hey, why are you out at 2 o'clock in the morning? What's wrong with you? As if anything that she did and anything that any woman does, even if they're completely half naked, deserves the right to be raped. None of that equals putting yourself upon another woman. And so it's hard to watch to see how much the world turned on her. And there were a couple of beacons of hope. There were people, but for the most part, she became this sort of, a lot like Monica, this punching bag. But it's harder, I think, for a black woman to sort of do that against one of the black icons of the time. No one believed, apparently nobody at the court believed anything that Tyson was saying. And he was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 10 years, with 4 of them being wiped away. And I think he only served 3 to 4 years. So the 2 week trial went on. When it was over, Desiree only did one interview. Because a lot of what was said about her is that she was a gold digger and she was going to try to write a book and do all this stuff and make a name for herself off of the back of Mike. She did one interview with Barbara Walters, and then we have never seen this woman again. We have never seen her, heard her. She completely dipped off the planet. And her thing was, I just wanted, as a Christian person, I felt it was my duty to tell what happened to me because Mike would probably do this again. And I wanted to make sure that he got help and that nobody else was in danger like I was. Then she went away. I think the most damning thing about that entire piece, and she said in the Barbara Walters episode, they actually have it sort of placed in the actual assault, is that when Mike is done with the act, he asks her, "Do you still love me?" That's rough. Because it shows you that Mike, the type of thing that's going on in Mike's head, that he feels like he could take this and like, hey, I need you to still be there for me. It's hard. This whole episode was hard to watch, and a lot of what my issues were with the rest of the series sort of happened here. I thought everything was taken a little too easy, a little too light, let him off the hook for a lot of things. This episode smartly took it and put it from the viewpoint of Desiree and allowed us to get under the hood and the mess of sort of the tyrant that Mike could be if you were not his friend. It's a powerful episode, and I think they did a masterful job of doing this and putting it dead smack in the middle of the series to sort of juxtapose the rest of the stuff that we see always through Tyson's eyes. Was a chef's kiss. It is a unfortunate and terrible situation that happened to Desiree, and I'm glad that sort of she is, after this situation happened, that she was sort of villainized and then going away, all she has been sort of known as the footnote of the rape allegations or the rape person to Tyson, because Tyson sort of become this reformation character, and everybody sort of loves Tyson now that they kind of forget the nastiness that came with him. And so we're in a way, even though she is tried to be out of the limelight, so it's a kind of a dirty and kind of a messy situation to bring this back up and use her name in this way. But I also think this is sort of a way to give her flowers in a time where a lot of this stuff is taken a lot more seriously than it was back then. It was a sort of a perfect way to say, hey, this happened. Desiree, we're sorry, we effed up, the world effed up, then here are your flowers now. I still don't want her or need her to come out and say anything or do anything, but I do hope that wherever she's at, she's seen this and seen sort of the respect and care that they've used in this episode to tell this part before we go back to the next episode. The next episode is called Jailbird, and it goes back to Tyson's viewpoint. Tyson's in jail. It's interesting in that, kind of like in real life, we go back to using the framing device of the comedy special or the stand-up special. He doesn't take much onus or much say in the rape. He sort of dismisses it and says, hey, you guys are going to feel however you want to about me. It's very a flippant way, especially after seeing that previous episode. It's a much more flippant way of handling who he is and what he's become. But he spends time. This episode is all about his time in jail, and he very much goes in with the idea of let me be the aggressor in prison because I don't want to be someone's bitch. He doesn't want to have happen what he did to Desiree happen to him. So he becomes overly aggressive and is picking fights with people who don't even want to pick fights with him. No, here's what's crazy. He is of the mindset that everybody's going to try to beat him up or rape him because he raped someone and they know why he's in there. But no one's dumb enough really to be like, I'm going to go attack Mike Tyson. So he is put in his brain that, hey, all these people are trying to get me. They're trying to get me. They're trying to get me. When he is putting out there like, nope, you're not getting me because I'm doing this to you first. It's a very, again, we can see that there's a very troubled man that is happening inside that Mike Tyson huge frame. We start seeing that he kind of is making his way through the rounds of prison. He has a prison mate who tries to kind of reform him. It's like, hey, you should be reading books. Instead of reading the comics and stuff that you're reading, get a real book. Mike's like, man, go fuck yourself. I don't want to hear you. Go away. He's very much defiant. But some of that stuff does stick. And then he loses that bunkmate. Another one comes in, and they can sort of continue that process. He starts using the Islam section of the jail to sort of be his hiding spot for getting different paraphernalia and different products in and out of prison. He gets his hands on guns, he gets his hands on phones, but it's just going through the motions of what you do in prison without actually having any type of reformation or any type of character change. He gets very much told like, hey, this is your time to change anything. If you want to go out and do the things the exact same way that you did before you got in here, by all means. But you now have time to sort of reflect, think about who you are, use this time to do so. And he goes half and half. He does eventually get into with the Islamic beliefs and it starts sticking and he starts listening more. It's funny after watching the Desiree episode, it feels a little bit disingenuous, but I do think that there is a bit of he doesn't want to go about doing the things that he did before the exact same way. Whether that's acknowledging the rape, I feel like that should be a part of it, but it's not. But there are steps that he is doing to sort of make himself a better person, like eat healthier, all of those things. Nothing that really deals with boxing. He doesn't really focal point on that. While Don King is outside trying to get all these purses together, he's seeing money in his books jump up because there are purses coming in for the anticipation that he's going to come back out and start fighting. Don King is doing all of his stuff, but Mike's like, I don't even know if I really want to do that anymore. So it feels like in the future we're going to start getting the last two episodes. I know when the Holyfield thing happens, but it sounds like we're going to start seeing the pressure to box to keep money coming in, but not really having any desire, hunger, or want to train or go through any of the process that it does to take your body to go through that. There's a funny sequence that happens in this as they show a moment when he is out. One of the cooks or one of the people who prepared food for him is at Tyson's home or Don King's home. It's not clear, but Tyson is sitting there with the chef. I think it's Tom or something like that, and he makes a bean pie. Don King's on the phone doing some work, and he's like, gets off the phone. He's like, "Man, I'm hungry." And Tyson's like, "You got a bean pie," and Don King like throws it, and then goes in the fridge and grabs some pork, which, for anyone who doesn't know, people of Islam do not eat pork. He takes the pork, throws it at him, is like, fry it up. And my man was like, I don't touch pork. And Don King essentially fires him on the spot. It's like, cool, you can get out. And Mike's like, well, what are you doing? Like, I'm sorry. Later that night, he gets a ring on the door. Tom, with many constituents of the Islamic belief, with weapons, pretty much tell Don that you are no longer able to fire him, and sort of put Don in his place, and Mike kind of just laughs and appreciates it. I think that's a way that Mike sort of further gets into that belief because he knows that Don's a leech and he doesn't really know how to get out of it. So these folks are now there to kind of prep him and help him remove himself from that situation. But that's just a funny sequence that sort of happens in that episode. That kind of like, I can see how Mike kind of feels that way. After spending time in solitary, after spending time and kind of getting himself back together, he is finally released in '95. And he leaves the cell with his beliefs, him sort of going into that. He's wearing the hat, the gear that those of the Islamic belief wear. But he's greeted by fans. And this is where this gets disheartening especially watching these two episodes back to back. He is met by fans who are very much in his corner, want to see him back out there, want to see him shine, want to see their superhero back. Be damned of what took place to put him there. They're all like, Mike's back. Don King's there obviously to make his meal ticket back on the hunt, back on the prowl. But that is sort of the juxtaposition of these two episodes. These are kind of a perfect two episodes to put together. Is that this young lady has gone through pure hell. Her entire life has altered and changed because of this event. Mike's does as well. He goes to prison. But what is learned, what is gained, what is changed for him doesn't appear like it is equal to all the tarnish that has happened to this young lady. And then you get out of the prison and you're still celebrated. And that can be confusing to someone who's like, hey, I was told that I needed to go to prison. I feel like I'm supposed to perform, but I get out here and I still have money coming at me. I still have Don King telling me I'm the greatest. I still have all of these fans saying, hey, you're great. Now, granted, the fans are probably at the same level that they used to be, but there's still some. And so it's going to be interesting to see the back half of his boxing career, because I know there's ups and downs. He takes a lot more L's in the back half of his career than he does in the front. There's a lot of sort of quote unquote tomato cans that they throw in front of him. He gets a belt, but I know once the Holyfield stuff happened, starts going down, it started going back down the other way again. And it's going to be interesting for somebody who, granted, Holyfield was headbutting him a lot, which we'll probably get into, and he'll make an excuse. I do think that Mike, unfortunately, shows that as we get back down this cycle, there's a lot in there that we still have not actually dealt with. I didn't speak on the Maya Angelou. There's a moment where Maya Angelou comes to visit him in prison. They have a moment. And I think he did hear. He is actually reciting Maya Angelou back to her. But they take a photo together that she gives to Mike, and Mike sells it. Just goes to show you that while he is learning some things, he's still very much about what is best for him. And that is kind of the problem with Mike altogether. Even though I think there are moments of humanity or hilarity or sympathy within him, it all comes down to the very end that what is best for him. And that does not always equate, clearly with the Desiree episode, to what's best for everyone else. What did you guys think about these last two episodes of Hulu's Mike? Go ahead and leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name. That's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that plays podcasts. We are there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.